Hallo liebe Zuschauer, herzlich willkommen auf meinem schönen Hof
Hello
Grünwald im
everyone,
südlichen
welcome to my
Dänemark.
place,
Ich
a
heiße Katja
beautiful
Hunold,
horse farm
bin
in the south of
Tierärztin,
Denmark.
mache eine Weiterbildung
My
in
name is Katja
Chiropraktik,
Hunold. I'm a
arbeite aber ausschließlich
veterinarian
als
with further
Pferdetrainer.
training as a chiropractor,
Ursprünglich habe ich
now
natürlich
working
Dressur- und
exclusively as a
Springreiten
horse
wie
trainer.
alle Jugendlichen praktiziert.
Like most
Später
young
bin
riders,
ich
I
in die
started with
akademische Dressur
dressage and show
eingestiegen. Das
jumping,
Besondere
and
ist aber,
discovered
dass ich
academic
ausschließlich
dressage
mit
later on.
Kleinpferden arbeite,
What
also
sets
weder
me
Sattel- noch
apart
Zaumzeug
is that I
benutze.
work only with
Wenn
horses at
man
liberty,
keine mechanischen
so I don't
Hilfsmittel
use a
hat, braucht
saddle
man
or a
besondere
bridle.
Techniken, um mit dem freilaufenden
When you
Pferd zu
don't have
kommunizieren
mechanic tools
und um
to
eine schöne
communicate with a
Formgebung zu
horse,
erreichen.
you need a
Davon
special
handelt
technique,
unser Film.
also to influence the horse's posture. This is what this film is about. We can't assume that horses will do what we want just because they like us or want to serve us. But we can use their natural instincts and reflexes in order to influence their movements. These movements are not classical dressage exercises, but rather very fine, sometimes almost invisible changes in muscle tone or in balance. They can be used like letters in a common language, which can be used to create words and, with some practice, even sentences. You may know many of these letters already from classical dressage, where they are used for biomechanically correct work with a horse and to ride dressage movements. Every movement is based on an intention or an emotion, which are the roots and motives of motion, and vice versa. Motion can also create emotion. This is why I chose to name these exercises after the intentions they have for communicating and working at liberty with the horse, rather than calling them classical dressage lessons. If we want to be able to control our horse's direction and speed, but also his posture in detail, like lateral flexion, stretching or collection, we need to be able to shape our horse's spine correctly.
Zum Glück brauchen wir nicht wie im deutschen
Luckily,
Alphabet
we don't need
26,
all
sondern
letters
wir
of the
kommen mit
alphabet,
wenigen,
but
vielleicht
only a
4,
few,
5
maybe
oder 6
5 or
Buchstaben
6.
aus. Meine wichtigsten
Let's have a look
Lieblingsbuchstaben
at some of
zeige ich
my
euch
favorite
gleich.
letters. Horses' reactions are based on intuition or on reflexes, so we don't need to condition them or train them for years. To demonstrate this, I chose Coyo for this film. He's a Spanish gelding, quite sensitive and a bit nervous. He's just arrived a few days ago so that I can work on some of his problems with him. Most unexperienced horses are tense or afraid when they're in a new environment. So if I want to create a connection with him, despite of this, I'll use the connection walk. You'll see that the horse will seek connection with me after just a few steps. Such as here, where his inner ear starts wiggling, or he may lick and chew or even touch me with his head. After a few moments of connection, the horse accepts me as his companion. He'll sync with my energy and mood. So I'm walking next to the horse in a big circle, and there's some slack in the rope. Then I'll put a bit more weight on my inner foot with each step, so I'll move closer to the center of the circle until I'll be slightly ahead of the horse's eyes. At that moment, I'll flex my hips, and this is what creates connection. It doesn't need to be physical contact. Connection more in the sense that the horse suddenly pays attention or hesitates for a moment. When you're accompanying your horse, you will recognize the connection when you feel a sense of physical and mental relaxation. This sense of relaxation benefits the horse, but most of all, helps the human be authentic and calm in their movement. The horse reacts best if it receives calm, simple, and precise instructions. People often talk about consistency when dealing with horses, but what it actually is that we have to be consistent with ourselves. Horses are really impressed by someone who's at ease with themselves and able to maintain their own rhythm and speed. I also use the connection walk before each new exercise, like a half parade in riding. As soon as we have a steady and calm connection, my role can change from being a companion to becoming a leader. The position from which I lead my horse is decisive for this. I mark my leading position by drawing a smiley face on my horse's shoulder. The second leading position would be closer to his head, the third more towards his tail. When I face the smiley face and walk backwards, the horse turns and follows me. This is the first leading position. Now I walk calmly and steadily towards the horse, which puts me in the third position behind the smiley face. This causes the horse to turn and make a smaller circle or a volte around me. Now, if I change direction without changing speed away from the horse, I'll get to the second position, ahead of the smiley face, and the circle becomes larger. This technique enables me to vary my leading positions even when the horse is going fast, and I don't need to rush. It also enables me to define our direction. Now I'll face the smiley face and walk backwards. The horse follows by reflex with his shoulder. He turns to me and comes to me in the first position. This position is ideal to make lead changes. I'll keep walking straight backwards, then turn my shoulder and point the horse in the new direction. He'll step past me and not vice versa, that's important. So that's how we can define direction without physical contact. Now I have connection, I've accompanied and led my horse. So now I can start with the actual body work. Any kind of lateral flexion of the spine causes the connecting neck and back muscles to stretch. You can observe the relaxation of the dorsal muscles when the horse lowers his head and his movements loosen up. There are a few spots which help us get flexion. I'll draw red dots on them. The first spot is around the third vertebrae, also called master of the neck. The second is well known to all riders. It's behind the elbow. This is where the rider's leg can bend the horse. When I position the horse's neck to the inside, while touching the red dot on his neck, he will visibly relax. I'm not pulling on his head, but wait until he drops his head because his muscles relax. He'll also release mental tensions this way, so that we have a calm and subtle basis to start working. Even his facial expression is calm and slightly withdrawn. Our next letter is yielding. Here the horse's spine is bent like a banana. The horse rotates in the direction it is moving in, so that his shoulder moves further in than his hind end. Wild horses often use this posture when they are fixating something scary with their eyes, making sure that it doesn't get closer. I'm drawing a blue line on the horse so that I can show you this leading technique. The line connects the red dots and goes down to the inner hind hoof. Any stimulation along the blue line will cause the horse to yield more or less. We don't necessarily need physical contact for this. It can be just a gaze, a gesture, or a voice signal. When we're near the upper part of the line, we get more flexion, stretch, and bigger steps. When we're further down the line, we'll get more lateral movement. This movement has an emotional component as well. When the horse gives us room, it is polite and respectful as opposed to being pushy or giving us the cold shoulder, so to speak. These two natural flexion points are the basis for flexibility and openness and help against headiness. When we have a horse that's a bit scared and tense, like our Koyu here, the yielding can turn into rushing or even flight. In that case, we need to explain the yielding from a good distance, or else we get an evasion rather than just a yield. I'm starting in the second position where I'm touching the spot on his neck. His neck starts to stretch and his steps become calmer and wider. Then and only then do I let my hand and my gaze sink down the blue line, which causes him to yield. If he hesitates or stops, I'll come back up with my hand to regain fluidity. As a general rule, any spot along the blue line can help us increase flexion, stretching, wider steps, and speed, and cause the inner hind leg to step more under. The next letter is closeness. For this exercise, I turn my hip and my shoulder away from the horse and invite him to step closer into the empty space. For Koyu, who's very shy, that's a big challenge. Here I'm drawing a yellow line on Koyu's body to highlight the leading direction for this movement. Like the blue line, it starts at the red dot on his neck, but then it goes over his withers and back to his outer hip. When we stimulate any spot along the yellow line, we get exactly the opposite as with the blue line. We'll get less distance, an easier bend to the outside, the head will come up, the steps get shorter, and the horse slows down. In the beginning, I make it easier for Koyu by moving his neck to the outside. Then I'll invite him to come closer with my hip and shoulder. Koyu understands quickly that he's supposed to come closer when I give him space with my shoulder, following the yellow line, and give me space when I lower my shoulder following the blue line. When we're in the first position, we have to walk backwards, which is rather difficult at liberty. If you've ever tried cantering backwards in front of your horse, I'm sure you'll agree. But luckily, the invitation following the yellow line also works in the second position when we're next to our horse. By focusing on the yellow or the blue line, we can influence our horse's distance to us and his energy and posture. The emotional components of the yellow line are closeness, slowing down, or confidence. They can help insecure horses such as Koyu to gain assurance. But when we exaggerate the movement along the yellow line, its associated emotions can also cross the line and turn into pushiness or aggression. With a bit of practice, we are now able to put some more space between the horse and ourselves. From above, you can see clearly how I'm switching between the yellow and the blue line with Bento. Just for fun, I've tried to create a small word with 2 letters. My hip is open, following the yellow line, but my shoulder is closed, following the blue line. Koyo is trying to figure this out, just like a child learning how to read. Spelled correctly, this exercise is the travers. You may be able to recognize a few correct steps. These few letters enable you to work with your horse at liberty without much preparation. We just need to make sure that we pick our letters in a way that the horse only moves in our direction. These create the basis for liberty dressage. With my left elbow, I'm asking Koyo to turn his head to the outside, and then I invite him with my hip and shoulder to move his weight to the side I'm on. As soon as I drop my hand in the direction of the blue line, his head moves in and he looks at me, which automatically makes him want to follow me. Now Koyo is coming to me at the first position, so I turn to his side to the second position. I accompany him along the blue line to keep our movement fluid. Then I invite him to come closer, following the yellow line. At last, I back off towards the center of the circle, which makes him come towards me and stand in front of me without physical contact. Now you know a few letters that'll enable you to create variations of more complex dance moves with your horse. They can help you define your horse's direction and speed, but also his posture and shape. With varying degrees of bend, flexion, extension, or collection. At the same time, we influence our horse's emotions and energy.
Nur mit dem Körper, mit einem freilaufenden Pferd
When
oder
you're
gar mit
able
einer
to
Gruppe
communicate with
freilaufender
your
Pferde zu
horse or with a group of
kommunizieren,
horses
schafft eine Verbindung,
only
die
via
stärker
body
ist als
language,
jeder Zügel.
you create a
Und
connection that is stronger than any rein.